BP 344, Accessibility Law, Minimum Requirements for Accessibility. Outside and around buildings. Drop curbs. Changes in level walkways should be by a drop curb. Drop curbs should be provided at pedestrian crossing and at the end of the walkways of a private street or access road. Drop curbs at crossings have a width corresponding to the width of the crossing, otherwise the minimum width is 0.90 meters. Drop curbs shall be ramped towards adjoining curbs with a gradient not more than 1:12. Drop curbs shall be sloped towards the road with a minimum cross gradient of 1:20 to prevent water from collecting at the walkway. The lowest point of a drop curb should not exceed 25 millimeters from the road or gutter. Curb cutouts. Curb cutouts should only be allowed when it will not obstruct a walkway or in any way lessen the width of a walkway. The minimum width of a curb cutout should be 0.90 meters. Curb cutouts should have a gradient not more than 1:12. Walkways and passageways. Walkways should be kept as level as possible and provided with slip-resistant material. Whenever and wherever possible, walkways should have a gradient no more than 1:20 or 5%. Walkways should have a minimum cross gradient of 1:100. Walkways should have a minimum width of 1.2 meters. If possible, grating should never be located along walkways. When occurring along walkways, grating opening should have a minimum dimension of 13 mm by 13 mm and shall not project more than 6.5 mm above the level of the walkway. Walkways should have a continuing surface without abrupt pitches, an angle or interrupts by cracks or breaks, creating edges above 6.5 mm. In lengthy or bushy walkways, spaces should not be provided at some point along the route so that a wheelchair may pass another or turn around. These spaces should have a minimum dimension of 1.5 meters and should be spaced at a maximum distance of 12 meters between stops. To guide the blind, walkways should as much as possible follow straightforward routes with right angle turns. Where planting is provided adjacent to the walkway, regular maintenance is essential to ensure branches of trees or shrubs do not overhang walkways or paths, as not only to do this present as particular danger to the blind, but they also reduce the effective footways available to pedestrians generally. Walkway headroom should not be less than 2.0 meters and preferably higher. Passageways for the disabled should not be obstructed by street furniture, bollards, signposts, or columns along the defined route, as they can be hazardous. Handrails. Handrails should be installed at both sides of ramps and stairs and at the outer edges of drop curbs. Handrails at drop curbs should not be installed beyond the width of any crossing so as not to obstruct pedestrian flow. Handrails shall be installed at 0.90 meters and 0.70 meters above steps of ramps. Handrails for protection at great heights may be installed at 1 meter to 1.6 meters. A 0.3 meters long extension of the handrail should be provided at the start and end of the ramps and stairs. Handrails shall require full grip, should have a dimension of 30 mm to 50 mm. Handrails attached to walls should have a clearance not less than 50 mm from the wall. Handrails on ledges should have a clearance of not less than 40 mm. Open spaces. Where open spaces are provided, the blind can become particularly disoriented. Therefore, it is extremely helpful if any walkways or paths can be given defined edges either by the use of planters with dwarf walls or a grass verge or similar which provides a texture different from the path. Signages. Directional and informational signs should be located at points conveniently seen even by a person on a wheelchair and those with visual impairments. Signs should be kept simple and easy to understand. Signages should be made of constructing colors and constructing gray matter to make detection and reading easy. The international symbol for access should be used to designate routes and facilities that are accessible. Should a sign protrude into a walkway or route, a minimum headroom of 2.0 meters should be provided. Signs on walls and doors should be located at a maximum height of 1.6 meters and a minimum height of 1.40 meters. Signage leveling public rooms and places should have raised symbols, letters, or numbers with minimum height of 1 millimeter. Braille symbols should be included in signs indicating public places and safety routes. Crossings. In order to reduce the exposure time to vehicular traffic, all at-grade crossings should be as near perpendicular to the carriageway as possible, be located at the narrowest, most convenient part of the carriageway, or have central refuges of at least 1.5 meters in depth and preferably 2 meters, provided as a mid-crossing shelter where the width of carriageway to be crossed exceeds 10 meters. All crossings should be located close, if not contiguous, with the normal pedestrian desire line. Provide tactile blocks in the immediate vicinity of crossing and as aid to the blind. The tactile surface has to be sufficiently high enough to be felt through the sole of the shoes, but low enough not to cause pedestrian to trip or to affect the mobility of wheelchair user. Special notes: tactile strips formed from brushed or grooved concrete finishes have not been proven successful, as they do not provide sufficient distinction from the normal footway surface and therefore should not be used. The most beneficial form of crossing, as far as any disabled are concerned, is the light-controlled crossing having pedestrian faces and synchronized audible signals, and should, wherever possible, be provided in preference to other types of crossings as determined by the duly authorized agency. The audible signal used for crossing should be easily distinguishable from other sounds in the environment to prevent confusion to the blind. A prolonged sound be audible to warn the blind that the lights are about to change. The flashing green period required for the disabled should be determined on the basis of a walking speed of 0.90 meter per second rather than 1.2 meter per second, which is what is normally used. The minimum period of the steady green for pedestrians should not be less than 6 seconds, or the crossing distance times of 0.90 meter per second, which is the greatest.